Batman is considered to be the world's greatest detective, but is he really? Welcome to Superhero Stuff You Should Know, where we put Batman's detective skills into question.
In 2022, Matt Reeves presented The Batman. As part of his new take, Reeves dove more into the detective aspect of Batman's world. The debates about his detective skills in the film prompted us to wonder about Bruce Wayne's actual skills in the comics. Specifically, is Batman actually the world's greatest detective?
If we see a detective as someone who fights crime and puts criminals to justice, then Batman easily qualifies as one of the greatest. But if we see a detective as someone who investigates a mystery, like Sherlock Holmes or Poirot, that's when things get pretty tricky.
In the typical mystery story, the detective investigates a series of clues to try to solve the case, with the same clues given to the audience so they can follow along. In a Sherlock Holmes or Poirot story, the detective usually figures out the case ahead of the other characters and the audience, using the clues we've seen. He then captures the culprit and reveals the answer to the mystery to us.
The thing is, in over 85 years, there aren't a ton of Batman stories that fit this structure, because while Batman is a good detective, he's not the world's greatest.
Now, before you start sending death threats, hear us out. If this is your first time watching us, then know that we're huge Batman fans. Just look at our other videos on the channel. This isn't about criticizing the character so much as maybe it's about criticizing what seems to be a mischaracterization by the fan base.
Because Batman just isn't the world's greatest detective. Let's take a look at one of his predecessors. Sherlock Holmes, the original world's greatest detective. In A Study in Scarlet by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Holmes was introduced to meeting Dr. Watson and deducing within seconds that Watson was an army doctor recently stationed in Afghanistan just from looking at him. Batman has never really been able to do that in the comics.
In most of the Batman stories, the Dark Knight seems to be mainly out to stop the villain's plan. If there's a rogues gallery villain behind it all, then the clues are relatively easy. Take Batman Annual 8, where Batman figures out that Ra's al Ghul is behind everything based on the logos that the henchmen wear.
Or Batman Annual 10, where he investigates who's trying to destroy Bruce Wayne's life. After a conversation with Lucius Fox, he learns about someone with the alias of Strangeways, and deduces that it must be Professor Hugo Strange.
DC Universe Infinite even lists A Death in the Family in a collection showcasing Batman as the world's greatest detective, and yet Batman never really deduces any mystery in it. When it comes to the identity of Jason Todd's mother, Bruce and Jason just find her through the process of elimination after asking other women if they could be related. Later, Batman suspects Joker of killing Jason Todd and gets confirmation from his enemy that it's true.
These are hardly examples that would earn someone the nickname of world's greatest detective. But perhaps we're not being fair. Perhaps we need to take a look at the mysteries that Batman's famous for.
Let's start with the movies. Obviously, there have been several Batman films released over the decades, but very few of them can be considered as mysteries. If we just take the theatrically released movies, we have two. Mask of the Phantasm, which asks, who is the Phantasm? And we have The Batman in 2022, where the mystery surrounds the identity of El Rata Alada.
However, in neither movie does Batman actually solve the mystery himself. In Mask of the Phantasm, the reveal that Andrea is Phantasm is pretty much given to Batman by the Joker when Batman picks up the phone when he's at her place. And in The Batman, the identity of Carmine Falcone as the Rat is revealed to him in the leaked voicemail on Catwoman's phone. And even the Riddler's plans to flood Gotham is revealed by his video in the hideout.
But maybe this is more of a movie issue than a comics one, right? Well, let's look at Batman's most famous mysteries in the comics, which are typically listed as The Long Halloween, Dark Victory, Hush, The Court of Owls, and The Black Mirror.
In The Black Mirror, Dick Grayson is Batman, so we can't count that towards Bruce Wayne's track record. But let's look at the others.
There's The Court of Owls, which, isn't really a mystery story, nor does it highlight his detective skills very well either, since the whole story is about how Batman is wrong. Here, a veteran Batman believes originally that the Court of Owls don't exist, and learns the hard way that they do.
Let's go into the Jeff Loeb stories then. The Long Halloween may be Batman's most famous mystery, and yet, is it really a showcase for Batman's detective work when he doesn't even solve the mystery? Here, the serial killer Holiday strikes once a month for an entire year before finally getting revealed to be Alberto Falcone. And yet, for an entire year, Batman never figures out Holiday is Alberto, nor does he figure out that Gilda Dent was also Holiday.
Spoilers, Ben! For as much as people criticize Batman's detective work in The Batman for not catching Riddler earlier in the story, the movie only takes place over the course of a week. Meanwhile, the Batman of the comics had a whole year to track Holiday, and still never solved the killer's identity.
The sequel, Dark Victory, is a slightly better display of detective work in that Batman does figure out the Hangman's identity, but this once again comes about after a full year of investigation.
Then we have Hush, where Batman tries to solve the identity of the new villain, except he doesn't figure out who Hush is either. Once again, it's revealed to him when Tommy Elliot outs himself. Batman mainly only figures out that the Riddler is behind it when he finds records that Tommy Elliot operated on an Arthur Wynn, which is Riddler's alias. But even then, Batman needs Riddler to explain the rest of his involvement to him at the end.
If we branch out further, we have mystery stories where a villain's true identity is unknown at first. This includes Year 2, Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth, Under the Red Hood, and the recent arc, Batman the Imposter. Except, Batman doesn't solve the mystery in any of those either.
In Year 2, Batman never even suspects that the Reaper is actually the father of his fiancée Rachel, until the Reaper's mask comes off.
In Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth, Batman doesn't figure out Dr. Cavendish released the inmates until Cavendish reveals himself.
In Under the Red Hood pretty much reveals himself about halfway into the arc, and when he does, Bruce is clearly shocked.
In The Imposter, Batman is close to figuring out the imposter's identity, but once again, gets beaten to it by the villain revealing himself.
Even if we count the Killing Joke as a mystery of where Joker is holding Gordon, Batman still doesn't solve it. He spends many pages trying to find Gordon, only for Joker to eventually tell him by sending him tickets to the carnival.
Which leads to another mystery. Batman admits that he's never actually figured out the Joker's true identity. While fans do love having Joker's origin remain a mystery, having Batman not know his identity seems to be another mark against his track record as a detective. It wasn't until the controversial Three Jokers story that things changed where Batman revealed that he does actually know Joker's identity.
Then we have the most personal mystery of all. Who killed the Waynes? While there are different interpretations where Batman finds the killer, he almost never solves that mystery either.
In the original Bill Finger story and in Year 2, Batman just happens to be investigating a different case when he recognizes the older Joe Chill.
And after the comic 0 Hour, this was changed even further where Batman never actually solves nor knows who killed his parents, in spite of being considered the world's greatest detective. It wasn't until the New 52 in Batman The Dark Knight issue 0 where a young Bruce Wayne is able to solve it and track down Joe Chill.
So, how is Batman the world's greatest detective if he barely solved any of his biggest cases? It feels as if the moniker of world's greatest detective is readily accepted by fans, but never really tested or fully debated. For years, I didn't even question it. It wasn't really until seeing criticisms for the Batman movie that I began to rethink how I saw Batman's detective work, and that the detective work from Robert Pattinson's Batman isn't that far off from what we see in the comics.
For example, one element that got criticized in The Batman was the Rada Alada clue. Critics interpret it to mean that Batman didn't know Spanish, but that's not actually what happens in the movie.
In the film, Bruce Wayne proves he knows Spanish because he actually identifies the phrase Rada Alada to mean stool pigeon in Espanol. Both Bruce and Alfred assume that the Riddler's El Rata Alada clue had incorrect Spanish. It's Batman's encounter with Penguin that enlightens him that it was a clue.
Critics may say that this assumption seems like a mistake that Batman wouldn't make, except he's made mistakes in the comics. Frequently. In Legends of the Dark Knight 32-34, Batman does manage to find the serial killer Mr. Lime, but only realizing it after a vital clue that was apparent several victims ago.
In the Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale story Fears, which I adapted for Numerous Creative and set in the Dark Knight trilogy universe, Bruce Wayne falls in love with a woman, but it's Alfred, not Batman, who investigates and reveals that she's a Black Widow murderer.
In the Journey into the Night storyline, Batman mistakenly stops people from chasing after a drug runner and incorrectly thinks they're the ones trying to mug her.
These three stories take place in year 2, but an even more experienced Batman has made mistakes. In Detective Comics number 404, Ghost of the Killer Skies, a classic story by the dream team of Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams, Batman gets the identity of the killer entirely wrong.
Batman number 414 has Batman going after the dumpster slasher killer, but capturing the wrong man and not finding the true culprit until Batman number 421, a full 7 issues later.
Another aspect that was criticized in The Batman was Batman not knowing the carpet tucker tool until Officer Martinez told him. While this could have led Batman to discover the plan to stop the flood earlier, the Batman of the comics does have his fair share of ignorance or having other people figure out bigger things.
In Legends of the Dark Knight number 49, Catwoman is the one who's onto the fact that the killer will strike next at a beauty pageant.
In the Journey into the Night storyline, Batman confesses to Gordon that he does not know what the latest drug is.
And beyond the year 2 stories, there are other instances of other characters knowing or figuring things out before Batman.
In a plot point similar to the carpet tucker in The Batman, it's Vicky Vale who tells Batman the significance of the derby hat in the story Scoop of the Century in Batman issue 49. Much like how a billionaire like Bruce Wayne wouldn't know a carpet tucker tool from a blue-collar job, Batman, as a man, is unaware that the derby hat represents women horse riders. It's thanks to Vicky that Batman knows Mad Hatter will strike at the Society Horse Show next.
In the Joker's origin story, Detective Comics number 168, Batman spends over a decade not knowing how the Red Hood was able to work his helmet, only for a couple of college kids to figure it out before Batman did.
In World's Finest number 176 is actually Superman who figures out the villain's true identity, not Batman.
And in Dark Victory, it's Dick Grayson who deduces that the Hangman's clue isn't "none of you are safe," but "9 of you are safe." Something Batman hasn't caught in close to a year.
So, let's face it, Batman's no Sherlock Holmes, nor Poirot in solving mysteries. If he's a detective, it has less to do with solving mysteries and more to do with catching on to the villain's plans and stopping them. Which makes sense when you think about it. We typically want to see Batman chasing and fighting after the classic villains. We want the villains to be hard to catch and not caught within the first few pages.
But if we compare him to other famous detectives, perhaps Batman's better suited as being called the world's greatest crime fighter. And you know what? It wouldn't take anything away from him. Just like there's more to Batman's character than not killing, which we talked about last time, there's more to Batman's character than detective skills.
Isn't Batman more interesting as a character if he's not right all the time? If he's fallible? If he's human? Isn't that the appeal of Batman? That he has no superpowers? That he's human, like the rest of us?
With all of his other qualities, does Batman absolutely have to be the world's greatest detective? What if he's simply above average?
Probably the best example of this is in the Scott Snyder story of Detective Comics number 1000, Batman's Longest Case. Here, Batman spends years in what he calls his longest case, only for it to lead to him getting inducted into the Guild of Detectives.
At the Guild, he's welcomed by Slam Bradley, which makes sense since Slam was one of the first detectives of Detective Comics. But he's also been beaten to membership by 7 other detectives. Detective Chimp, Elongated Man, Sue Dibney, The Question, Martian Manhunter, Hawkman, and Hawkgirl.
So, even in the DC universe, in issue 1000 of Detective Comics, Batman isn't the world's greatest detective. A good detective, yes. But the world's greatest? No. And that's okay. He doesn't have to be.
Hey guys, while we listed instances where Batman didn't solve the mystery, there are definitely stories where Batman does manage to solve it.
Leave comments on what stories you think are good demonstrations of Batman's detective work. I've gathered a list of at least 30 stories myself, and we'll share them next time. Big thanks to our research assistant Dan for gathering the visuals for this.
And thanks to all of our Patreon subscribers. We have hundreds of episodes on our Patreon. Please go to patreon.com/superherostuffpod and check out our $5 tier for a lot more content from us.